So today we're going to be checking out Givenchy Gentleman Boisee, which is the new 2020 release. Looks pretty similar to Givenchy Gentleman EDP in terms of the bottle, although this one's a little bit lighter and it's got this kind of textured wrap around the center of the bottle here. Really nice looking presentation. Of course, I'm going to review this one, tell you how it smells, how it performs, when you can wear it, and ultimately, I think it's worth picking up. I've been anticipating this one for a while because I love a lot of what Givenchy's been putting out lately, especially in their Gentleman line of scents. So I'm excited to dive into this one. So this one was a little bit unexpected for me, and the reason why was because when you look at the notes, you see a lot of sweet notes here. And of course, you see some of the woods and patchouli and other notes like that. And of course, along with some of the spicy notes that you see listed as well. So when I first tried this one, I was expecting it to be a bit more sweet than it actually is. In the opening, like when you first spray it on, you kind of get hit with a lot of that sweetness all at once. I'm talking about the cacao and some of that iris coming in kind of all together at once, and it's pretty sweet. But what you'll find is pretty quickly, and I mean like within a couple of minutes, a lot of that sweetness starts to fade off and you start to pick up on a bit more of a freshness. Now, I'm not fully sure where that's coming from. I think it is kind of a combination of the iris. I think, the majority of the sweetness is coming from a lot of the other notes listed, and the iris is a bit more fresh. So I think that kind of starts to come through. There's some geranium that starts to come through, and geranium can kind of give like a minty, fresh type of feeling depending on how it's used. That kind of starts to come through. You'll find that, a lot of that sweetness, that sweet blast in the opening wears off pretty quick. A lot more of the spices and the woods will kind of start to come into play along with that freshness that you get. The opening does smell great, and when I first sprayed this one on, I'm like, ooh, like this is going to be a winner. I can tell already. But when it started to change a little bit quicker than I was expecting, I started to change my mind on that a little bit. Don't get me wrong, it still smells great, but in my opinion, it's much more attention grabbing in the opening. The further to the dry down you get, the more it almost gets a little bit of this like generic freshness to it, like this like cologne type of freshness. That's really the best way I can describe it, like this cologne-y freshness. And again, that could be coming from the geranium in the woods, which is kind of a traditional or typical men's scent DNA. And again, that's not me saying that this turns into something that smells bad, but I am saying that it goes a little bit more in the generic direction as it dries down. Now, for some of you, that may be a deal breaker, but for me, I actually still really like how this smells in the dry down, although I do wish that it would maintain a bit more of that uniqueness that you get in the opening. Again, that iris still is prominent in the dry down, but it's a lot more of a fresh iris. Givenchy Gentleman EDP, that one is a bit more sweet. It's utilizing the iris and the vanilla, and it's just a bit more warm. This one, while it still does have just a little bit of sweetness in here, it's fresher. So the way I kind of see it as is it's almost like their slightly fresher version of Givenchy Gentleman EDP, but without going full-blown citrus like they did with Givenchy Gentleman Cologne. Of course, that one smells nothing like this or the EDP. This one you can still kind of compare back to the EDP DNA to some extent. It's just a bit fresher and a little bit of a different twist. I saw a few people say on Fragrantica that this is kind of like their take on Dior Homme Eau, which I can kind of see where they're coming from with that. I don't really think it smells like Dior Homme Eau. Comparing them side by side, I just can't really pick up on too much of a similarity, but I do agree in the fact of the execution on how Dior Homme Eau is just a bit of a fresher version of Dior Homme and Dior Homme Intense, utilizing that iris, but it doesn't go super, super fresh like something like Dior Homme Cologne would. I also find that in the dry down of Gentleman Boisee, it's just got a bit of a muskiness to it, almost like a kind of typical musky backbone that you would find in a lot of designer fragrances. So kind of all in all, to sum up the scent of this, I would say that it's kind of a little bit of a fresher take on the EDP without going too fresh, but at the same time, it's also going a little bit more generic. The EDP, while it does kind of smell like a few other iris prominent scents out there, it kind of puts its own twist on it, and it is kind of, loved for that reason that it's kind of a more wearable version of something like Dior Homme Intense or Valentino Uomo Intense, and it does kind of have its subset of people who really enjoy it, myself included. I love Gentleman EDP. And while this one may be a bit more generic, it's going to have people turning their nose up to it and not really liking it that much and to be fully honest, I can understand why some people aren't going to like this and aren't going to be happy with it. I try to look at it with as little a bias as possible and kind of realize why they released this. They released this because this is going to be, a mass appealing scent. It's going to be even more mass appealing and wearable than Gentleman EDP. It's just a bit fresher and it goes in a bit more of the warm, spicy direction. So when can you wear this scent? Honestly, this would be kind of one of those all year round scents, excluding like the really, really hot summer days. So, spring, fall, and winter, this one will do pretty good. Maybe in winter when it's really cold, might not be the best option, but I would say kind of just as a broad like blanket statement of what this one could be kind of like a signature scent type of thing. If you wanted it to, you'll just have to, adjust your sprays accordingly. If you do want to wear it in the summer, dial back on the sprays a little bit if you're going to be going out in the heat. And if you want to wear it in the winter, you might have to pump up the sprays just to get it to perform more because, again, it is a bit fresher and spicier. It doesn't quite have the warmth and depth as Gentleman EDP. In terms of like situations, you could dress this one down and dress it up a little bit. Although if you want to go more formal, I would go with Gentleman EDP. This one's really just like the more casual, easier to wear, and maybe a bit more youthful younger brother of the EDP. And in terms of quality, it's great quality. I mean, I don't really have any complaints there. It doesn't smell cheap. It fits in line with the other Gentleman fragrances in terms of its quality. No complaints there. Price point's a little bit tricky on this one because it's not really fully at discounters. It kind of hit and, gets sold out. And, when it first hits discounters, it's going to be kind of, wishy-washy until they can really get consistent stock of it and bring the prices down. So it's one of those things where I can tell you I wouldn't really pay retail for it. If you have Gentleman EDP, realistically, that one's probably going to be suited for you enough, and I don't think it's worth going out and buying this one at like $88 or whatever it retails for. If you can get it for under retail, once it comes down to around the $50 mark, that's kind of in the category to where I'd say, okay, now this one may be worth to go check out if you're a fan of the Gentleman line. Again, it does have a little bit of that generic twist on it, so it may not be everyone's thing, but $50 is much better than almost $90 when you factor in shipping and tax. Or it could be probably closer to $100 if you're like buying it from like Macy's.com. You got the shipping and tax. It's about $100. So at that price, again, I would avoid it. But once it rolls out to discounters and it's easier to pick up, I would say then you can go check it out. Ultimately, this one would be a good fit for someone who likes Gentleman EDP, but it's still just a bit too sweet or a bit too iris heavy, or it's a bit too maybe daring for you, right? Which is, understandable. I can get not everyone can quite get behind that type of thing. That's fine. This would be a good fragrance choice for you. Or if you haven't gotten into Givenchy Gentleman EDP or any other sweeter iris fragrances yet, this would be a great place to start as well. Even though it is a bit more fresh, it still can kind of get your foot in the door and start experimenting with iris a little bit. And again, once it gets down to about $50, that'll be a pretty good entry-level price point. So my final thoughts on Gentleman Boisee. Do I think it's worth picking up? For me, if you can get it for about $50, I say yes. And some people may disagree. Some people probably don't like it as much, and that's fine, and I can understand why. Like, I get why some people may not like this as much, but for me, I do like the kind of cologne-y freshness that it has. And yes, it's not something that I'll probably be wanting to reach for every day, but I can see myself wearing this one, and I can kind of, picture uses for it, especially as we kind of get into fall, a bit more casual, a bit easier to pull off. I can see myself reaching for this. I do like how it smells. So guys, that's going to do it for me. That was my thoughts on Gentleman Boisee, the new release. If you've tried this one, let me know what you think down below. Again, I do appreciate your support on these videos. I appreciate you liking and subscribing and all that stuff. It really helps me out and shows that you guys are enjoying the content. That's going to do it for me. Stay safe, stay healthy. We'll see you tomorrow night with another one. Take care.